So welcome back to Inspired Forward, everybody. I'm certain that you're really going to like our guest today. I know I do. Scott Morris. Um, Scott and I had an opportunity to meet last week or chat last week, and we kind of determined we had a lot in common. But before I get to that, Scott is the founder of SRM Real Estate Group, a full-service real estate brokerage in LA. He's got over 30 years of experience in real estate and mortgage brokerage, with transaction volume exceeding $1 billion. Scott's a passionate entrepreneur about his purpose-driven business model and creating partnerships that promote social good. Scott's social impact efforts are focused on type 1 diabetes advocacy, youth enrichment, and community building initiatives. I think you're really going to like his story. He's also a host of Dreaming of Cooperstown podcast that we'll get into a little bit. Cooperstown's a metaphor for achievement and learning to lead a meaningful life. Scott shares the stories of the dreams and the action takers, the achievers, and the impact makers who are making a positive difference in other lives. So, we do things, we're kind of aligned in that way. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Man, I really enjoyed meeting you or talking to you last week, and I'm excited to have you already on the podcast.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. We should have recorded that conversation. But,
yeah, no kidding.
But I kind of feel like that's a wrap. I mean, you just did a great job of kind of like teeing me up and, kind of told a lot about where I'm at right now. So anyway, thanks for that introduction.
You're very welcome. So tell me a little bit about you and what led you to the real estate and mortgage business and your success there, and then really where you became kind of focused on a new purpose, a new vision in your life.
Sure. So I'll kind of give you like some broad strokes. So I'm native Southern California, right here in the LA area, and was a finance major in college and kind of stumbled into the mortgage and real estate business. I don't know. I haven't met anyone yet that actually went to college to become a real estate agent or a real estate broker. Yeah, but somehow we all find our way. And I guess the story of how I found my way, maybe that's a better story for another time. But I was a business finance major. Actually, right out of college, was introduced to the mortgage business and exclusively for almost the first 20 years of my career. I was doing mortgages, and about 13 years ago or so, I kind of stuck my toe in the water on real estate brokerage. Wasn't really sure I wanted to get into it, but tried it out, loved it, and so today I do both residential real estate brokerage as well as mortgage brokerage, and so a little bit over 30 years in the business, and I got to tell you, more excited than I've ever been in that time. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but I was motivated to transform my business model about a year and a half, 2 years ago, to include social purpose, and it's taken what a business and an industry that I already loved and taken it to a whole new level and just kind of made it more exciting for me.
So tell me more about that. So what is it and what differentiates you?
Yeah. So I will tell you, it's still evolving, and that's part of, as am I guess. And and that's really part of the exciting part. I tell people that I think that there were three events that kind of were transformative for me and kind of set me on this path. And so, I'm happy to go over those events if you want, but certainly they kind of put me on this path. And initially the social purpose part of my business was around type 1 diabetes advocacy, and I was laser focused on that. And it didn't take long for me to realize that I really, it wound up going beyond just type 1 diabetes advocacy, although that's still extremely important to me, but it's kind of evolved to include other charities and nonprofits.
So how did you first get involved with diabetes?
Yeah, so of the three events, in chronological order, the second event was my son Ryan's diagnosis. He was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. Certainly myself, my family, we were one of those families that didn't really get or really understand type 1 diabetes. I, like many people, I certainly had heard of diabetes, but thought it was just like a lifestyle condition that was related to diet and exercise. And when it comes to type 1 diabetes, which is different than type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes is something completely different. It has nothing to do with lifestyle. It's, type 1 diabetics didn't do anything wrong or not take care of themselves. It's essentially when your pancreas stops producing insulin, and all of us, you and I and everyone, we need insulin's a hormone we need to survive, and so that's why type 1 diabetics, they take synthetic insulin. It's not a cure, but it's what they need to survive, and they take it either through injection therapy, or many people wear an insulin pump. And so my son was diagnosed. It was quite a blow as we my family, my wife.
13 at the time.
He was 13 at the time, yes, and so it was kind of a blow for us. I mean, any parent, any time that there's something, your child faces some sort of disease or chronic illness, of course it can be life-changing, it can be devastating. And so I quickly, and my wife and I, we tried to ramp up and climb that learning curve. There's really, with type 1 diabetes, there's a very steep learning curve, especially in the beginning, but there's not a lot of time. I mean, it's many type 1 diabetics, when they're diagnosed, they find themselves in the emergency room, and we certainly did on the day Ryan was diagnosed. Wow. And it's immediately about like this crash course in counting carbohydrates and learning to inject yourself with insulin and different types of insulin, and it's just it's very overwhelming in the beginning, and it was tough, and I often, people in the type 1 diabetes community, they often tell what they call their diagnosis story, which is the story of the day they were diagnosed. And I really won't go into our diagnosis story, at this time, but it's as I already said, we ended up in the emergency room, and Ryan at the time, as you said, was 13. He's a athletic teenage kid, and club baseball player. And we were in the emergency room, and Ryan was asked to change into a hospital gown. And my wife and I were in the room, and as he changed into the gown, our jaws must have hit the floor, because Ryan looked like he had lost 20 pounds overnight. I mean, he was skin and bones. You could see his rib cage. It looked like he was trying to bust out of his skin. And I, I had been kind of like in a little bit of state of denial. My wife had been picking up on what we now know to be warning signs of type 1 diabetes, but I was explaining them all away. And but it was in that moment in the emergency room that I realized that there was a problem, that this was something I couldn't explain away. Again, Ryan's an athletic teenage boy. He was eating like a horse at that time, and he should be building muscle, gaining weight, and to lose weight that quickly, I knew that was something that I couldn't explain away. And I tell people that I made two promises in the emergency room that day. Like any parent, I promised I would do whatever I could to help Ryan get better. And I promised that I would do whatever I could never to feel that helpless again, because in that moment I felt helpless. There was something attacking Ryan's body, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't know what to do.
Shocking. And I mean, the fear sets in, and man, as a parent, I can imagine that kind of shock. And wow. So how old is Ryan now?
So Ryan turned 21 this year.
How's he doing?
He's doing fine. As you know, type 1 diabetes it's people that are in that community, they understand. If you're not, many people don't. And it's a chronic disease. It's a daily battle. And you're trying to manage your blood sugar levels, and you need to, keep them in a certain range. And so the devastating complications come if you go too low or too high. And so it's a daily battle, and it's tough. You can never not think if you're a type 1 diabetic, you can never really not think about it, because it's constantly managing that blood sugar, counting carbs, how much insulin should you take, and it can be a real burden, and it's difficult because it's not something you can really figure out. In that, what I mean by that is, Ryan could have a really good day managing his blood sugars, and he could journal everything that happens that day, exactly what he ate, when he ate it, portion sizes, what was his physical activity like that day, what exercises did he do. I mean, he can have a great day. And then the next day he can go and take all of those notes and try to duplicate that day and have completely different blood sugar readings. So it's a battle, and I have a lot of respect for all type 1 diabetics, because of although I need to be careful here. I'm always careful to say that I have no idea what it's like to live with type 1 diabetes on board. There's no way that I can, but I know what it's like to be the parent of someone that has type 1 diabetes, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for people in the type 1 diabetes community and what they have to go through on a daily basis.
Man, so when you got the news, how long did it take you to I don't know how I want to describe this, but get back to the calmness and normalness of your being, so that you could see it clearly? Because I know that shock would throw you into just panic. What did you do? What was your way of getting okay?
Yeah. It's as I said before, it's like in the beginning there's a steep learning curve, and of course it was all about how do I get Ryan, how do I get him better? And, at the time, again, he's 13 years old. And, as I'm learning more about the disease and I read a lot about, well, actually, before I'll say that. So here's where my mind was. And in hindsight, of course, it may seem silly, but at that time, I was probably easily, 25 years into my real estate and mortgage career. And I was ready to ditch that career and figure out, like, okay, do I go back to med school and become a doctor and focus on type 1 diabetes? And then, of course, I realized quickly that's not going to happen. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm a sales guy. I've been in real estate and mortgages forever. I'll ditch the career and go, work for a medical device company like a Medtronic or someone that serves that type 1 diabetes community. And then I realized, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense. But I was trying to figure out where my place was. So eventually, I got to, well, I just need to keep where I'm at and do whatever I can, in the real estate business. And eventually that led to going the social purpose route. But it did take a while to answer your question. I mean, it's probably different for everyone, but I'll be honest with you, for like easily the first 6 to 9 months, maybe even the first year, I could have never had a conversation like this without breaking down and crying.
Yeah, I get it.
And it's like, even as I say that now, I mean, that's just like, I start every once in a while, I get this like little frog in my throat, and I have to be careful because it was very emotional, very difficult, and I wanted to be there for Ryan. And, I heard a lot about depression with type 1 diabetics just because of that daily, that daily battle. And I thought my best place is to do what I already do, be there for Ryan, make him realize as best I could as his parent that this was not something that was going to limit him, or let him know that he can accomplish anything that he wants to accomplish, and this is just one of life's events that he needs to embrace and figure out how to move forward, knowing that he's type 1 diabetic.
Right. It's just a shock, and it's part of our journey. As I told you last week, I lost my wife of 28 years to leukemia, and it happened so suddenly, from no signs, no symptoms, to diagnosis, to hospital, and so I could kind of relate the shock of, someone you love coming down with something that is kind of out of your control. And now what do I do? And like you, I immersed myself in learning as much as I could, and trying to be there for the boys and her family and my family. It's just and like you, I couldn't talk about it for many, many, many years until my boys landed on their feet and I found love again. But man, it's I look at it, and the way I got through it was really finding the gratitude, being grateful for certain aspects of the occurrence, and how it all came together. But that took a long time. How do you think how are you overcoming that fear? And I know that you started cycling, and I did the same thing, and I know that brings a lot of purpose and joy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that and as I had mentioned to you before, I'm happy to hear your story, and I look forward to learning more about your story about, as you said, your kids landed on their feet and you found love again, and we all go through things, and it's the way life happens, and so I guess to answer your question, I feel like I'm just continuing to grow, and it's, for me, it was about when I was ready. And again, it was difficult to talk about for a while, but when I was ready, I wanted to be part of the solution. And that led me to JDRF, which is the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation.
Great.
And I got involved on their board of directors, and then I fell in love with they have a cycling Ride to Cure program. And that changed. The first time I did one of those JDRF rides, it changed my life. And it's just, this journey's continued to evolve. Of course, it's about helping Ryan, but again, I transformed my business model. I feel like I'm a completely different person than I ever was before, and I'm on this journey of self-development, self-awareness, and it's again, as I think I said earlier, I've never been more excited than I've been in my life, so yeah, I'm doing the JDRF rides, and every day I'm looking for new ways to, both personally and professionally, to make a difference in the lives of other people.
That's so awesome to hear. And by joining a group like that and participating, it gives you a little bit of understanding that other people are going through it as well. It gives you other families to discuss, and because now you guys have direct things in common, and share your experiences, and that certainly helps. It certainly helped me. So you said it transformed your business model. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Uh, so initially it was just simply that it was all going to be about type 1 diabetes advocacy. And I was just simply going to, whenever I worked with clients, I was going to donate money to JDRF. And I was really, of course, like really passionate about my story. And I found as I was, whether it was friends or clients, or whoever it was, people were just, they were great, supportive, and very complimentary of me, and the things that I was telling them, and the things that I was trying to accomplish when I shared my story, my family story. But I quickly realized that although type 1 diabetes advocacy is my family's story, most people have a story or a cause or a charity that they're passionate about, and certainly you do. Based on the story you're telling me about your wife, and so it didn't take long for me, to realize that there was something that I felt I wanted to do beyond just the type 1 diabetes advocacy, and something that I can do to kind of bring my friends, my clients, into this place. And what I did is, and by the way, so one thing that was surprising is there were some people, again, I've been doing this a long time. So as I was telling my story, people that I had known for years, sometimes friends, or acquaintances, and sometimes clients that I've been working with over the years, that opened up and shared their story. And I remember many times being surprised, like, wait a minute, I've known you this long, and you've never really told me that before. And they, as I opened up and became more vulnerable, and they would do the same thing. And so what I did is I thought, okay, well, when I work with my clients, I'm going to do my best to learn more about them and their story, not just from the business side of things, but I always do. I wanted to get to know my clients better, and it became more in this, space of service to others and the charities that they're passionate about. And again, they would readily open up to me about that. And so what I started doing is I would also make a donation to the charity or cause that was meaningful to them and to their family. And it didn't happen very often, but sometimes a client would say, well, there's not really a charity that or cause that I'm passionate about. Maybe there hadn't been some life-changing event that had happened to them that they felt that way. And in those cases, sometimes they would say, but Scott, I really like your story. And they would say, take my portion and give it to JDRF. But I wanted to give them options as well. So what I did is I went and kind of vetted some nonprofits in the communities that I live and work in, and basically I will offer those to my clients. So if a client doesn't have a passion around a certain cause or charity, I would tell them, well, here's some charities that you may or may not be familiar with. They're doing very good work here in the community, and I would introduce them to that charity, give them a link to the website, tell them a little bit about what they're doing. And I would tell them, if one of these really jumps out at you or resonates with you, great, let me know and I'll make a donation to that charity. Wow. And again, it's been evolving. I know it's going to continue to evolve because that's just the way things work. And there's a couple other things that I'm working on now that I hope lead to, something meaningful. There are things around youth enrichment, and so it's again, it's an exciting time, and it's one of I guess it's one of life's paradoxes that something that I wish never would have happened, like Ryan's diagnosis, and then again there's another event that I wish never would have happened, but collectively these events have put me they've changed my life, and in a good way. And initially that was hard for me to wrap my mind around, to say, wow, I feel like I feel really positive things that I know are a consequence of these events that I wish never would have happened. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It gives you, I mean, it starts to defining your purpose. There's a reason this happened. I mean, it depends on your belief system, but I believe that, Ryan's diagnosis was, served as a purpose for you to find your purpose and help other people. And it just takes time to get peace and understand that others are going through it. And with all that said, it's just part of our journey. So you had mentioned that there were three components or three things that have happened, and Ryan's diagnosis was number two. What was that number one?
So number one was actually a good event of the three, and that was we had talked about this a little bit briefly before. I'm a baseball guy, and I think you have a passion around baseball as well.
Yeah.
And I had a really great experience. Ryan, again, he's an athlete. He was a baseball has been his game, and I had the opportunity to coach Ryan and his teammates, along with a few buddies of mine, coach their travel team. And we had them for about 6 years, from about 6 years old to 12 years old. And we had a great time playing a lot of local tournaments, and my coaches and I, it was always about teaching them to be better baseball players, but it was more than just that. We were trying to teach them to be fine young men. And I'm a firm believer that that there's a lot of lessons that sports teaches us that helps us throughout life. In fact, I once heard, I don't remember where, and I've repeated it often, that I believe that when it comes to baseball, I believe that kids go to the diamond to learn baseball, but they leave the diamond learning life if it's done properly. And a lot of those lessons you learn on the field have practical applications for all of life's worthy pursuits. And so so for 6 years we had a great time. We always knew what we were shooting for, and that was when the kids were 12 years old, we were going to take them to Cooperstown, New York, for a baseball tournament. Teams from across the country come to this baseball tournament, and it's a really great event. And so that's always what we were working toward. And when we were 12 years old, we took them to Cooperstown, and it was just, we had an epic tournament. I'd love to tell you that we won the tournament. We didn't, but the entire journey of 6 years was incredible. But their Cooperstown tournament was it was epic. They came out, there's 105 teams from across the country that come together for this tournament. And we got off to a slow start, and actually lost a couple of games in the beginning of what's known as pool play before the playoffs start, to teams that, quite frankly, we should have beat. And my kids, our kids, they just did this epic turnaround. And so I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. So we finished pool play with a 3-3 record, and the way pool play works is it determines your ranking in the playoff bracket. And after we lost those games early on, the kids turned it around. They finished pool play strong, but still, because of those games they had lost in the beginning, we were like the 56th seeded team in the playoff bracket. And it's single elimination. So once you lose a game, you're done. You're out of the tournament and you go home. And on playoff day, our kids won their first playoff game, then they won the next, and they won the next, and they won the next, to advance to the round of 32. And it was 12 consecutive hours of baseball on one day. Yeah, and these kids are only 12 years old, and this is summertime. Cooperstown is hot and it's humid, and these kids, it was just amazing what they accomplished. And they only had like 15, 20 minutes to rest and hydrate between each game. But so the short story is they didn't win the tournament, but I very much believed that we came back from Cooperstown with something more valuable than a championship trophy, and I was going to show these kids that what they had accomplished over those 6 years and what they had accomplished in Cooperstown could carry over throughout their life, those lessons. And so I left Cooperstown. I was inspired. I was going to write a book, and that's where my head was. And then the second event was Ryan's diagnosis, and so I called this after Cooperstown. It was Dreaming of Cooperstown, which is the name of the podcast that you referred to earlier. And for me, Dreaming of Cooperstown, it's a metaphor. And initially it was a metaphor for achievement. And then it became a metaphor for achievement and learning to lead a meaningful life. And that's what that means to me today. So that's my, sorry, I could talk about baseball all day.
I could too, so I get it. We'll have to do that sometime. So do you mind sharing number 3?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Again, very difficult. But so I lost my sister in a car accident. Hold on one second.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I lost my sister in a car accident, and she was just 50 years old at the time, and I was asked by my brother-in-law to speak at her service, and I really, of course, I said yes, and I wanted to get it right, and I really spent a lot of time thinking about it. And ultimately, what I talked about was I wanted everybody that was in attendance to know how much my sister Tracy had meant to me and how she had positively impacted me. And it was really losing my sister that I discovered. We all come to these things in different ways. None of this is revolutionary. I mean, I didn't discover anything, but we come to these things in our own time, in our own ways, I believe. But what I learned from losing my sister was that the real calculus of happiness, the truest measure of a life well lived, is the difference we make in other people's lives. And because that's the story people are going to tell about us once we're gone. That's our greatest legacy. If after we're gone, people are telling stories about how we positively impacted them, that's our greatest legacy. And so that's what I learned from Tracy at the time. I found this quote that resonated with me. It's my favorite quote to this day. And Albert Pike said, "What we do for ourselves alone dies with us. What we do for others and for the world remains and is immortal." And so, sorry, I get that frog every once in a while.
No, I understand, Scott.
But yeah, this, I mean, those 3 events have put me on this path.
Well, and I think, Scott, if you went to Cooperstown and, came back from Cooperstown and none of these events happened and you wrote your book, it would be, a completely different contribution you're making to people. You're seeing the world significantly different, and you can now, with those events in your life, add significant value to a lot of people you have. You've impacted the kids, your coaching staff, certainly your son, certainly all the people in battling diabetes and their families, and certainly with the loss of your sister, I guarantee you see the world differently. And like what you just said, life is pretty short. I always say life is long, but it goes by fast. But these events put things definitely in perspective. And I think there's going to be a point in time that all these things that happen. We're going to discover why, and I mean, you're clearly living a life, like you said, with specific purpose. So,
Thank you.
with that being said, Scott, so there's the running of your mortgage business and your real estate business. Um, kind of how do you keep that balanced? So I mean, my struggle has always been, so when I start cycling for Leukemia Lymphoma Society, my heart and passion goes there, and it was hard to stay focused on the mortgage industry and other businesses. How do you balance it all?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I guess the way that I would answer that is, one way, and I guess you could call it balance, was I decided after those three events, I decided that, I needed to be true to myself. And I had to go with what I was feeling. And I guess what I mean by that is I didn't really think of myself as, this is Scott Morris personally, and this is Scott Morris professionally, the real estate broker, mortgage broker. And of course led to me figuring out, okay, wait a minute. I know who I am. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. The good news is I'm self-employed. I have my own business, so I don't have to run this by anyone else. And I started thinking about, well, how can I make my business, all these things that I'm feeling about wanting to make a difference, how can I incorporate that into my business? And so I guess you could call that balance. So certainly, going down that path, it helped. The other thing, and again, I want to be really clear. None of these things that are going on in my life right now are things that I'm trying to convince anyone that I discovered. Again, in fact, these are all, like, many of these things are fundamental truths that have been around forever. And it's just, we discover these things in our own time. And so, right now, I'm very focused on, well, actually, so let me go ahead and say it this way. So this is to kind of use an overused metaphor for like a journey. This is exactly where I am right now. If the destination is making a difference in someone else's life or in other people's lives, to lead that meaningful life, that life that matters, which is certainly where I want my legacy to be, or my destination, then the highway to get there for me is type 1 diabetes advocacy, it's youth enrichment, and it's community building. And then to extend the metaphor and to use what seems to be kind of like a popular thing that I'm hearing and people talk about these days, if I'm gonna pick a lane, the lane for me right now, it's about building like structure and agency. And what I mean by that is, again, this isn't something I'm discovering. I mean, to be very clear, if maybe I could write a book on things I know, but I guarantee you could fill a library on what I don't know. So I want to be, I'm learning as I'm going. But again, I'm very dialed in right now to what are my life principles, what is my purpose and my mission and my vision, what are my core values and my core value areas, and that's where I've never been as dialed. I'm 58 years old. I've never been this dialed into that right now, and it's really exciting. And so I tell you these things because you asked about like balance. This is forcing me to get my life in balance, because I'm identifying this structure, these things that are important, and I'm building my goals around these key value areas. And it's liberating, and I think that it gives me balance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, big time, man.
Yeah.
You've definitely inspired me, and I think you've inspired everybody listening for sure. So people are going to want to listen to your podcast. Where do they find you? And if somebody wanted to reach out to you for help or, some coaching in a specific direction, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So thanks. I'm happy to, help anyone that feels like they want to reach out or learn a little bit more. So again, as part of this evolution and going forward, I started this podcast, funny, 2 years ago. I had never listened to a podcast. I'd heard about a podcast, and now I have a podcast. And so the podcast, Dreaming of Cooperstown, I explain what the metaphor is. And it's really about telling those inspiring stories. It sounds like kind of, the same path or mission you're on with your podcast. And, and it's to tell these stories in the hopes that it will inspire other people to maybe get involved with my guests and their mission, or be inspired to whatever that thing is they're keeping inside to go out and do their thing. And so you can go. I have two websites. I have my personal and my business site. My personal site is where you'll find the podcast Dreaming of Cooperstown. The personal site is scottrmorris.com, and again, that's Scott, my middle initial R, Morris.com. And that's really kind of like the hub. If you go there, you'll find out pretty much everything about me and how to connect with me.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you so much. I really can't wait to get to know you better, and I know we'll be able to collaborate about some different stuff. And I'm sure glad I was introduced to you last week. Thank you for your time today, and I look very much forward to talking more with you.
Well, again, I appreciate it, and I want to thank you. I mean, not only for letting me share this story, but for everything that you're doing. We're just getting to know each other, but I'm really liking what I'm hearing, and I'm anxious to learn more about your story, and hope we can connect. Hope we can connect face to face here sometime soon, and we could talk more baseball. We could talk more. About how we can maybe collaborate and make a difference in other people's lives.
Sounds great. I mean, our paths, came together for a reason. So thank you again, Scott, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, man.
Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye.